Hello everybody, Carrie Philpott here, who just simply loves to sew, and I am with Sew Steady and EmbroideLee to present to you the Geese EmbroideLee collection this morning with a very fun project that I have just found to be exciting beyond words, and it is our new Shadowed Geese collection. Now, this collection is one that is featured in our fourth quarter Elevate Your Creativity Club box, but it's also one that is available for you to be able to purchase independently. And I have found the designs in this collection to be quite inspiring. There's a wonderful guide that shows these that comes in the box. And one of the things that I like to do when I first receive my memory stick that comes in the box, it looks like this. And remember, bear in mind that since we like to invite everybody to the party, when you receive one of these memory sticks from us, all of the designs come in every machine language. We want everyone, whether you have a Pfaff like what I have, or a Janome, or a Brother, Baby Lock, Bernina, long arm machine, whatever you have, we have all of the designs digitized in your language. So you can just plug the stick into your machine or into your computer and be ready to go with those designs. Now, as I was saying, one of the first things that I like to do when I do receive that is do a stitch out of all of the designs so that I can look at them and have them as a reference guide. And you can see, look at how many beautiful designs there are. There are borders, there are corners, there are circle designs, there are a lot of different looks that you get on this. And once again, because we know as quilters and as people who like to do a lot of different kinds of embroidery, every design comes digitized in 4-inch, 6-inch, 8-inch, 10-inch, and 12-inch sizes. Now, you can size them up and you can size them down at your heart's desire, but having them so that they are already standard quilt block sizes makes it easy for you to just put them right in and be able to quilt right offhand. Now, I'm going to move the camera in a little bit right here because my backdrop that I have right here shows a quilt where I have done one of the designs to quilt in my embroidery hoop, a quilt using one of the Geese Shadow collection to create being able to do a quilt all over. In fact, it was so easy to do this on my machine that I was able to quilt this entire quilt in a morning. Get it done. Sometimes that's what we want to do, isn't it? But I also like the idea of being able to use embroidery for something other than quilting. So what I am going to be showing you today is something very seasonal. And we're going to be making this wonderful quilted witch's hat because next week is Halloween. Now, there are lots and lots of patterns that you can just download for free to actually cut them out. But the first thing you're going to do is prepare the fabric for this. And so that is what I have on the machine right now. So I wanted to just zoom in a little bit and show you what I have going on. The first thing I have done is I have put the designs into my screen, and in this case I'm using the 4-inch design, And I have combined it in such a way so that they are making an all-over pattern. And what I have done that is particularly interesting is I am using a twin needle to do this embroidery. And that is giving it much more of a detailed look. The other interesting thing that I am doing is I am using a glow-in-the-dark thread. Glow-in-the-dark thread. How many of you have played with glow-in-the-dark thread before? It's really a fun thing to do because especially for Halloween and being able to have your little witches going out trick-or-treating, or even yourself if you're going to go out and collect a little bit of candy next week, is be able to have this glow so that you can see in the dark where people are going. So I'm going to prepare the fabric by having it do the stitching all over on the fabric to prepare it, as you can see, before I cut out the pattern that I have downloaded from the internet. So now that we have that and we stitched the whole thing out onto this, I'm now going to change my machine up for sewing so that we can put the witch's hat together. And you can see how easy and quick it is to do something along this line, because being able to do a project and have it done lickety-split is also one of the fun things that we get with machine embroidery and EmbroideLee is the fact that we can get things done. And I like the idea of being able to say, oh, I can check that off of my list. So I'm going to remove my hoop. And in this case, what I have done is I have hooped my outer fabric with one layer of warm and natural batting, which you can see here, and the lining fabric that I am using. So I will have a seam that will show. Now you can, if you would like, just hoop the outer fabric and the warm and natural, and then go ahead and line this in a traditional manner if you would like. The choice is yours, and it's nice having the choice be yours. So I have already got my machine, so I have a black bobbin in place, which is what I want. I am going to remove the twin needle, and I'm going to be replacing it with a standard Microtex needle that I'm going to be using. And I like using a Microtex needle because it has a sharp tip. And a sharp tip needle means that it has just that little bit of extra oomph to go through all of the layers of fabric. So I'll put that in my Microtex needle. I also like to cut my threads at the top and pull my threads through, because I sort of look at it like petting my cat. They like it when I pet her this way rather than this way. She tends to be a little bit quieter and not quite so bossy at me when I do pet her that way. And I'm going to thread my machine up with black regular sewing thread, 40 weight. I'm going to change my foot from my embroidery foot to my standard sewing foot. In this case, though, I am using one where I have zigzag capacity, because that will come in handy when it comes time for me to put the edging onto this. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to leave my embroidery stitch out. So it's moving my embroidery arm out of the way, and let's just zoom in a little bit more so that you can see what I'm doing. So here you can see the pattern pieces that I've cut out. Here's the brim, and of course, depending on the size of the brim, you can make this wider so it's floppier. The important thing is to make sure, though, that you have the circumference of the circle matching the circle edge that you have for the circle of what is going on inside the actual witch's hat. You can also make this point longer if you want a more pointy hat. You can also make it so that it has a little flop on it, so that it looks more like, say, a sorting hat. This happens to be a child size one because it is going to be going to one of my grandchildren. And you can see I have already cut out the fabric pieces. This happens to be for the hat part. And how pretty it is on the back side where I've used the glow-in-the-dark thread for the inside, because that will actually make this reversible. So now I'm going to switch my machine to a standard sewing stitch. And I'm going to sew. And for this pattern, it wants me to use a 1/2-inch sewing stitch, reverse to just sort of lock that stitch in. And get it so that it's going to come up to a nice little point. Once again, reverse. My stitches. So now I have a nice little cone all the way around. I am going to trim the point here. And clip my thread so that when I go to turn this, it will be nice and easy. Now I'm going to also now mark my quarter. Now you can either do this with the scissors, or you can use pins to mark where your quarter points are. And you do that by 1/2 here. Fold this like this, putting the seam to the pin. And you have your quarter points marked. Then I have my brim. And I'm going to mark the quarter points on it as well. Now this one, I actually did mark with little snip points so that I could have that when I was cutting it out, so that I would make sure that I lined up the pattern perfectly so that I would be able to do that correctly. So I have that there with little snip marks, as you can see. But I'm going to mark my quarter points. There. So it's marked. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin those quarter points right sides together. So in this case, I am pinning the black embroidered to the black embroidered. And it's always easier when you're not using a bent pin. So here I am, pinning them together. Now, most patterns say to use just a regular stabilizer when you download them. I find using the batting, which of course we have as quilters plenty of batting laying around because we usually have a little bit of extra on the sides of our quilts when we actually go and trim them up. But it tends, as you can see, to give it a little bit more body. And that can give us the ability to do a little bit more shaping. All right, and now I'm ready to sew the brim to the hat. It doesn't really matter where you start. And also in this case, I am using a 2.5 stitch length, and I'm using my awl to sort of help not just pull the pins out, but to sort of to make sure that those edges stay straight. And I'm using my needle down because that's a wonderful feature to have. It also helps me keep things nice and smooth. And here where I have a little gaposis going on, it gives me the ability to set it so that it is nice and straight together, so I can continue to sew all the way around. And this is something, of course, that can be done on any sewing machine, but adding the embroidery, especially with the glow-in-the-dark thread, is an especially nice little touch. And for the sake of my sewing machine, I am removing my pins rather than sewing over the top of them. And this way I'm getting a nice, smooth, even edge all the way around as I'm sewing here. made it all the way around, and so I'm going to back stitch a little bit just to lock that in. Clip the threads. And now I'm going to turn it right side out. Carefully turning that point at the top, and look at how fun that is. But look, you've got a raw edge here. Not terribly attractive, is it? So what I am going to do is I am going to bind this edge much the way I would with one of our quilts, where I have done the 2.5-inch strip of binding. And by doing it with the fabric that I have on the inside, it's giving just a little bit of contrast. Also, once again, making it so that the hat can be reversible. Round and around we go. Almost to the other side. Okay, and I'm getting close to the edge now. Trim off the excess here. Flip this over. And just stitch this edge down. once again using your awl just to make it a little simpler. And yes, of course, you can press all of this edging before you do it. And around we go. Almost complete. Cutting my threads. And there you can see I have the completed witch's hat that you can either put a little bit of elastic on each side here in case you have a windy Halloween, which so many of us have, or you can use this actually to hold your candy if you're going to have trick-or-treaters and they want to reach in to take some candy out. Or you can see that although this is a raw edge, you can zigzag around this. But if you have a serger, you can just serge right around this edge, and it's a lovely finished edge, and it's ready to go. So I will say, here we are, ready with a Halloween with glow-in-the-dark thread so that it will shine in the night with our beautiful Dizzy Geese design. And it's a fun thing for you to be working with. That's a quick, easy project that's a little something different than just making quilt patterns that are usable. And by using a twin needle and glow-in-the-dark thread, you get a totally different look than if you are simply using regular quilting thread with a single needle. So once again, this is Carrie Philpott with EmbroideLee, hoping that you have a wonderful time sewing and a very happy, happy Halloween.